Good morning, Syed Kamall. Congratulations on your election as leader of the European Conservatives and Reformists. My first question to you is, what's going to change in the ECR group under your leadership?
Well, thank you for your kind words of congratulations. I think what's very exciting about the group is that we are a growing group. We are now, as things stand, the third largest group in the European Parliament, but we're also going to have a positive agenda. We have the word reform and reformist in our title, and I want us to be the group that people look to for when it comes to ideas on reform.
You mentioned you've gone up in the rankings as the third largest group in the European Parliament. In order to achieve that, you've brought on board some populists, some extremists, in particular from Finland and from Denmark. What did you have in mind there?
Well, first of all, I don't recognise your description of them. I think they are they are very interesting parties. I actually sat down with the Danish People's Party and I looked them in the eye and I said, look, tell me these stories. You know, I see things on the internet about you. They said, look, some of those things are true. It's when we were younger. You know, we've grown up. I didn't know many people then from immigrant communities. I now realise it's time, you know, to move on, and we are a party that worries about controlled immigration, but we are not anti-immigrant. The same thing with the Finns. They said, look, we believe in tackling the issues on concerns about immigration, but we are not anti-immigrant. If you believe in building a Europe that meets the challenges of the 2050s, you are welcome to our group. But as long as, at the same time, you are a mainstream party or you are on a journey to being a mainstream party. And that's really what attracts all the various parties in our group together.
Let's talk about the nomination of the next president of the European Commission, on which David Cameron, your leader, has found himself pretty well isolated in his opposition to Jean-Claude Juncker. What is your take on the way this nomination has been carried out in the past 4 weeks since the elections?
Our criticism of the Spitzenkandidat process is twofold. First of all, it's a very tenuous interpretation of the Lisbon Treaty. It says the Parliament should be consulted. It doesn't say the Parliament should have the choice or they should choose who the next President of the Commission should be. But secondly, we're focused on institutional issues rather than tackling the problems that people out there face. When I knock on doors, people are worried about jobs, they're worried about growth, they want to see a forward, modernised society, they want to see better broadband connections, they want to see tackling some of the social problems they face. And what are we doing here in the Brussels bubble? We are talking about institutional issues, we're institutional navel-gazing, when we should be looking up to the challenges of the wider world.
One of the things they also talk about is the democratic legitimacy of Europe as a whole, all the institutions, and Parliament, the EPP and the Socialists in particular argue that the lead candidate process represents the democratic will of Europe during these elections. What would you say to that argument?
I entirely disagree. It does not represent the democratic will. If you speak to a number of my friends in different European countries, not all European countries, but different EU countries, many of them said when they voted at European elections, they were voting for their local party or their local MEP candidates. They don't even know who Juncker or Schulz or Verhofstadt was.
And who would you have liked instead of Jean-Claude Juncker, and why?
Well, for me, my main criticism is the actual process itself, the Spitzenkandidat process. I'm going to have to work with whoever ends up as the President of the Commission. And so I don't want to look back as to who else it could have been. I want to look forward. And one of the tones I'm setting for my group, it's all about looking forward, not looking back. So if it does end up as Juncker, I will have to work with him. And as long as he has an agenda of reform, then we might find some common ground.
You've mentioned reform many times during the course of this interview. Just run me through what are the key reforms that you want to see put in place, and what in particular is the timeline for this?
I think if you look forward, you have to think about what sort of world you're building in the future. You have to look at the world and Europe facing the challenges of the world for myself, my children, my grandchildren, looking forward to the 2050s.
Specifically, what are the
Of course, yeah. One of my problems is that we are too focused on institutional navel-gazing. I want less of the Parliament trying to flex its muscle vis-à-vis the Council. But for example, where any of the candidates talk about a digital single market, for example, we will be supportive. Where any of the candidates or the other groups talk about doing more with less money, and making sure that the EU budget just doesn't increase and take more taxpayers' money, we will be very supportive. Where they talk about more flexible employment laws to tackle some of the chronic unemployment you see mainly in Eurozone countries, we will support that. Where they talk about finally sorting out the Eurozone problem and getting to grips with the Eurozone problem and the fiscal transfers, we will support that. We will support meaningful reform that gets us out of our mess, but actually looks forward to the future.
Just one final question, because within the year the Conservatives will be going to the polls in the UK, and they need to be able to deliver something to the people of the United Kingdom in terms of this reform agenda that you're talking about. What do you need to have in place, or what commitments do you need to have within, let's say, 6 to 9 months, actual commitments that David Cameron can take to the people of Britain?
I think we need to continue showing that when people say that reform can't be achieved, that we can achieve reform. So, for example, when we took Britain out of the Eurozone bailout mechanism, a lot of our critics said it couldn't be done, and we showed it could be done. When we said we would get the first ever cut to the EU budget, critics said to us, not even Margaret Thatcher, that great defender of British interests and prudence, managed to get a cut to the EU budget. It can't be done, and we did it. So we have delivered change and reform in the past, and as long as we can continue to show not only our record of delivering reform, but continue to set the agenda on reform, then I think that's a positive message to take to the British people.
Okay, Syed Kamall, many thanks indeed for this interview.
Thank you very much.